Welcome, everyone, to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and you guys all know the co-host, Ron.
Hello.
Hope everybody's having a great day, and I'm going to just tell you right up front, I'm having computer issues, and this might be a really short show, but we're hoping to be able to get it in. My guest tonight is Joshua Bell. He wrote a book called Mysterious Middle River, and for those of you who know me, know that I grew up in Baltimore, and this is part of Baltimore County. And I was telling him prior to the show, he couldn't hear me because I was having computer issues, as you can see, that I grew up in Hawthorne, Middle River, Deep Creek, and Dundalk. So I know those areas well enough until about 1988. So we're going to find out what Joshua has to share. So welcome Joshua Bell to the show.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, no, thank you for waiting all this out with me.
Yeah.
So,
no
like I
worries.
said, if this gets cut short because of technical difficulties,
you let me know what you need from me. I can
we'll
persevere
reschedule
through
if we
this.
have to.
If you got to reschedule, whatever, I'm flexible. I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'm just happy to be here. Happy for the opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm excited to hear about the place that I called home growing up. You know, I had lots of stories, paranormal and not so much. And I'd like to hear more about where I grew up. And I'd like other people to hear about it too, because, I never heard anything at all about the area being haunted until a few years ago where Bill Bean was talking about it.
Yeah,
and I was like, really? I lived right there. So it just makes you wonder, I told people that I would see stuff all the time at Benji's Theater, at the drive-in. I don't know. Do you have anything about that anywhere?
Driving?
I was actually just recently at
back in that area.
I wish I had known. I would have kept a better eye out when I was there. So tell me about Benji's. What did you experience at Benji's? For those who don't know, it's a huge drive-in. It's like the biggest screen in Maryland.
Is it still a drive-in?
It's still in operation.
It's still open?
I was just there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's rare in itself.
We're getting ready to close for the season, but they're still there.
Yeah, nobody wants to sit in the drive-in in the ice and snow. It doesn't work well. So, but what I saw, this was back in 78 to about 80. There was a group of spirits that were running back and forth near the screen and back in the back where it was near where the cars would come in. You would see them on the side of the road. And to give you a heads up, I've been seeing spirits since I was 4. So sometimes spirits don't look like spirits. They look like real people to me. And I didn't realize until a few years ago that for me, spirits don't have feet. So, we have to go back in my memory to go, what did I see? But I think that they were soldiers back in the day, doing whatever they did back in the 1700s.
Well, I know the place has a lot
it's kind of based on how they walk.
Okay. That's really cool. I'm unfortunately a huge movie buff, so every time I'm there, I'm like focused on the movie and I'm not really paying attention to anything else around me. So I'll have to definitely keep an eye out for that next time. But that's cool. I know a little bit about that area. It was originally part of, I forget the whole family's name, but I know Benji, short for Benjamin. But I know at one time it was basically like a nature preserve where a lot of very influential people would come in and hunt around there. This is a long time ago before the area was built up. So I know it has that history. I don't know about any military history connected with that specific piece of property or not, but it does not surprise me. As many things as I've read about and heard about from this area, that does not surprise me one bit.
Like I said, it would have probably been maybe either Revolutionary War or 1812. Then that era of time, so there was that. Let's see. I saw stuff at the Edgar Allan Poe house downtown.
Mm-hmm.
That's another story that we're not going to share.
Hello, Mom, and hello, Crystal.
And let's see, there was the Glen L. Martin Airport. That thing is haunted as well.
Mm-hmm.
And my story is that I saw some men there. One didn't have an arm. I mean, it was bloody. It was a bloody stump. And but I don't remember what he was. Mm-hmm. I got in trouble for climbing over the fence. And and the police called my mom to tell her.
Uh-oh.
And they weren't real happy with me, to say the least. But I went to school at Hawthorne, and so we just went down the across the creek and just went up over there. It was that close. People didn't realize how close it was. Back then. Basically Hawthorne Elementary backs up right to it. So
yeah, I'll tell you something interesting about Hawthorne. So Hawthorne, as far as I know, doesn't have like a reputation for being haunted. But when I was researching the book, I came across maybe like a half a dozen little stories and anecdotes here and there where somebody was like, "Oh, I saw something at this park or that park, or this happened at my house," and it really piqued my interest. I don't know a lot about the area. I drive right past it every morning going to work. I work just down the street. But there's some interesting things going on, not just in Hawthorne. Hawthorne interests me, but in that whole general area, there's UFOs, a lot of spirits, hauntings, all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, it's always been interesting to me, the stuff that I would see and hear back then. Because I mean, I would walk. I lived all the way in the back, in the government subsidized housing back there. So that meant that I would walk from Gershbeck's all the way back to the peninsula, and I would walk through, the parks, because it was faster to walk through the park than it was to walk on the main road. And it kept you away from people, walking in the alleys and stuff. And there was always something to see, whether it was paranormal or not. But again, back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't talk about that stuff out loud.
Right. Now, if you don't mind, there's a couple of really big incidents that interest me from the 1970s from that area. Do you mind if I ask you about them?
Sure.
Okay. So in 1976, there was a Bigfoot sighting right behind that shopping center where Gershbeck was. Do you remember that happening? Do you remember hearing about it at all?
Yeah, I do remember hearing about it. I remember some of the people who lived up behind it. Their yards were in the alleyway behind it. I remember somebody telling me something about that.
What happened?
Bigfoot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, it interests me because at the time there was a whole lot of Bigfoot sightings going on the other side of Middle River, over near Harewood Park, Oliver Beach, that area.
Mm-hmm.
But in the middle of all that, there was this one single sighting over there behind that shopping center in Hawthorne area, which there was also a little bit earlier than that, other Bigfoot sightings down, I guess, like the Cedar Beach area, like further down that area. You familiar with that peninsula? Like down by the old little airport and all. And so I always just thought it was weird that we had this one Bigfoot sighting right in the middle of the community. Didn't seem to be connected to these other Bigfoot sightings. They were all going on like kind of further away with highways between them and stuff. But there was that one in Hawthorne. Essentially, the story is that there was a taxi driver who was taking a break. He was parked his taxi behind the shopping center there. I think he was just like eating, having his lunch, and there was something rummaging through the garbage or whatever. And when it became aware of his presence, it supposedly picked up trash cans and actually started throwing them at him. And this was published in the newspaper later on, and it came from a police report. The police actually responded to it and were aware of it at the time. So it's kind of a cool story, but like I said, it sort of sticks out because it didn't happen in the same area that those other Bigfoot sightings that happened at the same time.
it makes me wonder if it's related to anything related to Aberdeen Proving Grounds.
Yeah.
You know, because a friend of ours wrote a book about, Frank, Frank J. Bennett.
Yeah. I know
Wrote
of
a book
Frank. I
about,
don't know him personally. I have
well,
to get to know
yeah,
Frank. I'm a big fan of his book, though. I love his book.
yeah, he's a really good guy. Well, the reason that I got his book was because one of the things he mentions in it is Gino's, and that was my favorite restaurant growing up, because we didn't eat out a lot, so that was Gino Giant was my thing, but the Aberdeen Wild Man, what are the odds that it could be an experiment that got out?
Oh, absolutely. And I live right there near where the Hereford Park stuff is going on in 76, and all those Bigfoot sightings were happening. The very first sighting there actually took place across the river, very, very close. I mean, like probably within feet of where Frank had his encounter with the Aberdeen Wild Man. It's called the Aberdeen Wild Man, and it's associated with that area, but he actually encountered it much, much closer to where I am. I mean, I can almost see the area from my front door if I was to look. There's some trees in the way and stuff. I can almost see where his encounter happened.
Yeah, and I remember going out to Gunpowder State Park and seeing stuff that I couldn't explain as well.
So I don't know if you've seen my book, but my personal experience that kind of started putting me down this sort of path that I'm on now, it actually started there at Gunpowder State Park. Are you familiar with that story? Or?
No, I'm not. I haven't had a chance to get your book yet. We just got back from vacation and all that other stuff. So you're my first interview in probably 6 weeks. And yeah. So I'd love to hear, why you got started writing the book about.
Sure. Just to give you and anyone else that's listening a little bit of background. I, up until a year ago, I was not what you might call a public figure. I never wrote a book. I was just a big nerd. I just love this paranormal stuff, and I liked reading about it a lot. Like I mentioned, Frank's book was a big influence on me. So I grew up interested in this stuff. And then in the 1990s, I was out with some friends one night. We were just driving around like teenagers did. And so we drove to the end of this road, which goes through this state park. And people that are, not familiar with the area, it also ends at some private government land, which is part of Aberdeen Proving Grounds that you mentioned. And there's a lot of really cool history associated with that place. So, but anyway, we came to the end of the road. We're at this government area. It's blocked off. There's barbed wire fence. There's literally signs saying you can't take pictures. So we're turning the car around. I tell my friends, I was like, I got to go to the bathroom. And they start giving me a hard time, joking with me. They're like, oh, you can't get out of the car. There's going to be an axe murder in the woods. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I get out of the car and they're waiting for me. And just to kind of mess with them a little bit, I thought I would walk up the road a little bit. Now, this is actually a gated off road that leads into the state park, the Dundee Creek Marina area. So I go up the road a couple hundred feet or so and then just put myself away from them, just kind of mess with them. And I'm going to the bathroom, taking a leak out there on the state park. And as I'm doing so, I hear footsteps. Now, I've camped, I've been in the woods before at night, I'm assuming it's just a deer or something, but I continue to hear them. I'm watching, and eventually I realize what it is. I say eventually, it actually just took me less than a minute, but I see this person, and they're standing maybe 100 feet or so in front of me, and they're coming out from behind a tree. And they're looking directly at me, they're kind of like walking in this sort of weird sidestep motion. So they're not really trying to hide from me, but they're being kind of cautious. And I'm staring at them. Now, there's no light outside. There was moonlight. It was kind of a clear night, so I could see like the light on their head, and they looked bald. They didn't have any hair, but it looked like they didn't have any face either. I couldn't make out any clothes. I couldn't make out any facial features. It was this sort of tall, thin, skinny, bald, human-looking thing staring at me. Years and years later, there's these urban legends and internet thing that popped up about these creatures called the Rake. And it looks similar to what these people were talking about years and years later, although that stuff was made up for the internet. But whatever it was I saw was real. To this day, I don't know if it's paranormal. It could have been crazy teenagers partying in the woods and nothing with me. I don't know. But it made me feel uneasy. So as soon as I could, I ran back to the car. My friends and I, we left. We got some courage. We came back a little bit later that night. We went looking for it. We couldn't find it. We went back several times that summer and looked for it, and we never saw it again. And as I said, I don't know that it was necessarily anything paranormal. I don't know if it was a monster. I don't know if it was an alien, but it intrigued me. And I was already interested in this stuff. And I was always reading a lot of books. And whenever I would come across something from the Baltimore area, the Maryland area, I'd make it a point to either remember it or make a note or make a photocopy. And with time, I started finding more and more things from this general sort of Middle River area. Not all, I have things from Dundalk and Aberdeen and other areas, but a lot of it seemed to center around Middle River. And I did nothing with it. I was just, like I said, a big nerd. I read this stuff, I collected these stories, and I sat on them. And then I don't necessarily, I'm not one of these people that believe that things happen for reasons, but the last year of my life sure feels that way. My wife decided she wanted to up and move, and it was sort of unexpected. And we were supposed to move to the Terry Hall area, which is another part of Baltimore County. And in our search and in touring all these we were touring houses at Perry Hall every week, and there was this one house in Middle River. And she's like, "Hey, I just want to go check this out. This looks interesting, whatever." So we take her a ride and see if she sees it. She falls in love with it. We decide to move to Middle River, completely unplanned. As we're in the process of buying the house, I start recognizing some of the street names in the area I live in. Right away, I start figuring, I'm like, oh, wow, I read about these places in books. I have stories. I have notes and files about these streets that I'm now looking at right now from my front door. So I was bored, and I decided to start a Facebook page, Mysterious Middle River. And I just started sharing this stuff just for fun, just because it's stuff I'm interested in, and it's things, like I said, I've collected for a long time. And within a few days, 2 weeks of starting the page, I was asked to do a public presentation at the local museum, the Heritage Museum in Essex, down on Eastern Boulevard. I didn't even really want to do it at first because, like I said, this is not my thing. I'm just a reader. I'm a collector. But I did it, and it was very, very well received. I really liked it. I had a really good time. And so since then, I've just had many, many opportunities opening up to me, like being here with you tonight. I mean, this is not something I really planned or was even looking to do. But when I wrote the book, I included some of Frank Bennett's stories, and I sent it to him. And I wasn't even sure if he had read it because I didn't hear back from him for a couple of weeks. And then one day I get a message. He's like, "Here, contact my friend Denise Pride. I think she'd like to talk to you." And I'm like, okay. And things like this just keep happening. I've been invited on another show. I've been invited to speak at a UFO conference lately. Like, these opportunities and things just keep happening. I think because people are just interested in this stuff. It wasn't something that I had planned. I never planned on writing the book. It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is a lot of people live in that area, and a lot of people have lived in that area. In fact, here's a funny story. We were looking at houses here in Milton, Florida. The first place, was it the first place we went to? First place we went to. The real estate agent that was at that area. Second. She said something, and I looked at my husband. I go, "She's from Baltimore." And he doesn't even ask how I know anymore. Okay. Because I don't sound like I'm from Baltimore anymore. But, I tell people that all the time. I'm from Baltimore, lived in Kansas for years. I don't sound like it anymore. I was talking to her, and I said, "Well, where in Maryland did you grow up?" And she goes, "Hawthorne." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "What elementary school did you go to?" Kind of testing her. And she goes, "Hawthorne Elementary." I said, "Me too." And I said, "A long time before you, of course." But, and then found out that she also went to Stemmers Run. Of course, it was a middle school then, as opposed to a junior high when I went. But it was just so funny that I've never met anybody except for people that I grew up with that knew that school even existed. So you have that way, there are people all over this country that have stories, most likely about Essex and surrounding areas. But like when people ask me where I'm from, if I get down to the nitty gritty, I always tell them it's basically Essex, because that's where I lived the most of my life. But when you said Perry Hall, I used to live on Bel Air Road as well, and out in Churchville. So, and Churchville is really haunted too.
So, yeah, I couldn't even really begin to tell you the kind of stuff that goes on up in Churchville and the Harford County area because it's so much. I just can't wrap my head around it. Like, I have a few things in the book, and I know of some, but there are a lot of authors out there that have written about it that know a lot more about me than me. So I just sort of didn't want to go on their turf, so to say.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out what people have to say about Loch Raven, because I know that there was a lot of rituals done out there back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to say that. I was actually just writing something about that yesterday. So there's a chapter about Loch Raven in my book. And again, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but when I was invited to speak at the UFO conference, they asked me to specifically talk about the Loch Raven UFO incident there. So I gave an hour-long presentation on Loch Raven, and then just a week ago, a gentleman that writes a local zine that covers music and culture and stuff in Baltimore, D.C., he found me through the book, and he's writing a big article about Loch Raven and all the strange things that go on there. So all of a sudden, I've kind of become the Loch Raven expert, which I don't know how that happened because I don't consider myself an expert, but everybody's been asking me to talk about Loch Raven lately, so I'll tell you whatever you want to know about Loch Raven.
Well, I did not know about a UFO incident, but I would assume with the lake being as big as it is, that it's very possible.
Okay, well, there's actually been dozens of UFO incidents in Loch Raven. If you want, I'll tell you about the most famous one. It's actually a really big one. So in 1958, these two young men were driving down Loch Raven Boulevard. They go up past the dam, and they're about to cross the very first bridge there. And as they were just getting, I'm sorry, let me back up for a second. Further up the road, because they're driving on a ridge, there's a break in the trees, and they can see the bridge from a distance. And there's a UFO hovering above it. It's this giant glowing egg. The thing's like 150 feet wide or something. It's huge. And what's cool is because of the terrain and whatnot, they're like at eye level, almost above it. So this wasn't like something far off in the sky. This is something they're looking down on. So they get curious. They get in their car. They continue up Loch Raven Drive. Just before they get to the bridge, I think like 75 feet from the bridge, the car stops working. And it's not just the engine, the lights die, the radio dies, the brakes work, so they stop the car and they're just sitting there staring at this UFO. The UFO is still in the same place. It's so bright they can't make out any structure. It's just this egg-shaped glowing object. And all of a sudden they get hit by this intense fear and they don't know what to do. So they jump out of the car. There's no place for them to go, because right before the bridge there, the bridge isn't there anymore. There's a new bridge and it's been altered a lot. But basically there's a really steep cliff going up and a steep cliff going down in the water. So they hide behind the car. They watch the thing for like another minute, and then suddenly it shoots up into the sky. And it creates like a sonic boom sound, but it's gone. The two gentlemen drive back the way they came from. They go back to the intersection of Loch Raven Boulevard and Joplin Road, which is the nearest payphone. When I investigated this, one of the things I did years ago was to drive out there, stand where they stood to see if the things could happen the way they described. I even drove back to that intersection to see if it would take me around the same amount of time it took them, and it did. Everything I could tell that they described could have happened the way they described it. So they get back to this payphone, and they call the ground observatory, who basically laughs at them and doesn't have anything to do with the UFO report. They call the Towson police. The Towson police come out. They take statements from the guys. They look around. They don't find any evidence. But by this time, one guy's face is kind of red, and they start, they're worried they were exposed to radiation. So they go to the local hospital, St. Joseph's. They get checked out. They're fine. They go home. The incident made the local papers. It didn't appear out of state, but it was enough to get a few people interested in. NICAP came to town that weekend and investigated it. Excuse me. They performed the very first investigation. Blue Book found out about it, and the Air Force came out and investigated like a week later. As the Air Force was conducting their investigation, they decided to stop at a local restaurant, Pierce's Plantation. Pierce's was up the road more, but it had a clear view of the bridge where this happened. So they go
I can
in.
see that.
And they start asking around. Well, several people in the restaurant say, yes, the night that this happened, they heard that sonic boom sound and the thing took off. They all verified that it happened. Then they admit that 4 people in the restaurant saw an almost identical object the very next night along Loch Raven Drive. And by the time the Air Force left here, they had more questions than they came with. They had more witnesses. They literally ended their official investigation into the Loch Raven UFO by saying they believed things happened the way the witnesses described, but they couldn't explain what it was. And then the head of Project Blue Book a couple of years later retired, and he used that whole Loch Raven incident in his book as an example of an unknown, as something the officials couldn't figure out. So it's a very, very famous case. And there's some other really big ones too, but that's like the big Loch Raven case.
Well, first off, you said Towson. That's where my grandma lived. My grandfather worked on Joppa Road, and my mother was dating this guy that took me and my sisters to Pierce's plantation, where I also had another paranormal experience.
Oh, what happened to Pierce's?
There was this lady that kept walking around looking at the tables. She was really confused, and she was from probably like 1870. She was in the Victorian type clothes. I don't know if she's related to the house or not, but I was 12 years old. So all I can tell you is what I saw. I can't break it down anymore because, like I said, I was 12. And, but it was really interesting at the time because, I came home and I told my sister, she was there, but, my mom wasn't with us. My mom's boyfriend took us out. He was trying to smooze us into liking him. And
right.
My mom, she had told me don't say anything. So when we got home, I told my sister Donna, I go, Donna, there was this woman there. And I said, she wasn't real. And she goes, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I just know. And I said, because first off, I saw her walk through people. That was the first thing. And the second thing is she didn't seem to really recognize that anybody else was there, so she was totally oblivious to other people. So she was residual, now I know she was residual, but back in 77, I didn't know squat other than I was seeing this stuff that I couldn't explain to other people because my mom didn't want me telling people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, I could tell you all these different places that I had stuff happen, but there's really never been anybody to really talk to about these actual locations because why would they care? And I don't even know, is Pierce's plantation even still there?
It is still there. Most recently, it is a Indian vegan restaurant that only serves stuff made with local food, only open certain hours a day. So I haven't personally been there. It's a little bit of a few hoops to jump through there for me. But
I would think, but again, and what's strange is when I have dreams about the area of, that part of Hartford County, it's always the roads of Loch Raven. Always. I can see the hills and the cliffs and everything. I can see it all still. But there's some other stories to go with that are totally inappropriate for radio. But no, my dad, when I was 3, stuff I said that I shouldn't have said.
Oh.
Yeah. No, don't need to be on air. But I had a lot of experiences out there, over time. I remember some little cottages back in there. I don't even know if they still exist, but there were little cottages all over the place back in there, back in between 74 and 80, the last time I went. So it was always interesting to go back in there.
I had a personal friend. He's not around anymore, but he used to always tell me how he was back in that area, partying in the woods as everyone did back then. It was late at night, and they could see these weird, strange lights jumping up and down and kind of dancing, he said, around the valley and stuff. A lot of people have seen stuff out there. It's one of those things that until you know about it and you start looking for it, until you start talking to other people, you don't realize how common it is. I used to go out there hiking with a friend of mine, and I knew that famous incident happened that I told you about, and I didn't know anything about it. I just knew it happened. So we came home one night, and I was like, I want to know more about that UFO story. So like, I Googled UFO Loch Raven, and so I start reading the story. Two guys are driving across the bridge to see this balloon-shaped object and just appeared, blah 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 blah. And then I realized this story that I'm reading about happened in the 2000s, not 1958. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so I back click, I start reading the next story, and like it's another one and another one. Eventually, I did find the one I was looking for, but like that night, it quickly dawned on me that there was a lot of stuff going on out there with UFOs and bridges. And then the more I looked, I just started finding ghost stories. In 1973, I believe it was, some guys were exploring a cave near the dam down there, and they came across these creatures with glowing eyes. There's been Bigfoot sightings out there. There's been ghosts. There's been all kinds of stuff. I was actually just recently reading and researching another Loch Raven encounter, which, funny enough, for a long time I dismissed because it's so similar to the other one. And then the gentleman that was doing the Loch Raven article, when I was talking to him, he's like, no, no, it's different. Look into it. Look into it. For all these years, I've just been ignoring it. 5 years earlier, 1953, two guys taking a drive out at Loch Raven at night. They had actually gone to Towson. They picked up some girls out of Goucher College, and the girls weren't ready yet. So the girls said, come back. So they go out for a ride. They pick up the six-pack. They're heading back to Towson, and they cut down Loch Raven Boulevard. They get to the exact same bridge, and they see a UFO. Now, the thing they saw was further out in the water, but it wasn't directly over the bridge, but it was the exact same bridge. And the thing they saw, they said it kind of looked like two pie pans together, your classic kind of flying saucer shape, and it had a
Mhm.
band of ultraviolet light in the center. And they're sitting there, and the car stops working, just like the other story that happened 5 years later. The car just died. Just like before, they get scared, they jump out of the car. Now, here's the funny thing is these guys were so terrified, one of them climbed up that steep cliff and hid in the woods. The other one climbed down the steep cliff and hid in a gully down by the water. They continued to watch this thing for several more minutes before it finally took off. And so, like, it's such a similar story. It both happened in the 50s. For the longest time, I just wrote it off. But then this other guy turned me onto this interview, and somebody else pointed me towards an article. And the more I looked at it, it was not the same story. This guy was a government worker. He went to work next to the, I'm sorry, he gets picked up by the police who came along and found him in the ditch. I'm not sure how long he was in there. I kind of personally suspect he might have had missing time. He never said that, but the police pick him up. They take him to Towson. They interview him. He goes home. He goes to work the next day. He works in Towson directly across from the police station. He's a government worker. Everybody in his office is being really strange to him and weird and won't talk to him. And eventually he figures out they know about this incident. It only happened hours earlier, but it's already gossip's already getting around. He goes to leave and he's approached by these gentlemen in suits, and they say, we need to come up. They take him back to the Towson police station. They sit him down. He's introduced to two more men. One of them says they're from Project Blue Book. Now, at the time, he didn't know what Project Blue Book was. It didn't mean anything to him. But they ask him what happened. He tells them the story, and they say, well, we've actually already interviewed your friend, and your story matches his, blah, blah, blah. And then they look at him, and they're like, but that's not what happened. And they say, you started seeing headlights from an oncoming vehicle, and you saw this, and you saw that, and you imagined everything. And if you want to keep your government job, you're going to keep your mouth shut. Stop talking about this. And I'm like, that's such a crazy story. And it happened in the same place, same bridge, two guys. And I had that other story that I told you about earlier that happened to two guys in the 2000s. Like, there's so many weird things going on out there. There's so much patterns to it.
You know, the biggest reason that the brakes still worked and nothing else did was
Yeah.
because they were manual brakes as opposed to power as they are now. Now that stuff might give out.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
Well, the other thing too is, and I only know this because I got curious about it recently, but you always hear these stories about electromagnetic pulses and UFOs disabling cars and stuff. But half the cars today have so much electronics in them and stuff. If that happened today, those cars probably wouldn't start again. Back then, once the UFOs left, they were able to turn the cars on half the time and leave, but that kind of stuff wouldn't happen today.
Now, especially if you have a Tesla, you're screwed.
I never thought about that. That's a good one.
So, but yeah, it was the rituals that always creeped me out. Hearing about that out at Loch Raven and also out in Gunpowder always made me go, I don't want to go out there at night. I mean, yeah, I was a teenager and stuff, but I mean, honestly, I left the area by the time that I was almost 16, and I didn't come back until I was over 18. So during the times that I would have been out exploring, I was not there to do it. So, but I would have still been creeped out with the fact that there may have been somebody doing a ritual in the forest.
Yeah, so I'm actually writing an article about Loch Raven. It's basically just based on the presentation I gave, and that's one of the things I was curious about was exploring, and I was doing this yesterday. When I went out there in the early 2000s, I did find a little bit of evidence that there might have been some sort of rituals or something going on out there, and I wrote down. I don't know that it necessarily could be influenced by the stuff. But sometimes when weird things happen and there's UFO sightings that attract strange people who bring strange things into the area. But regardless, I think there could be other connections to that. So I would love to hear what you had heard back then, if you can remember that. Because I've never heard anyone else actually bring this up before. And here I am writing about it, and then you start talking about it tonight. So please share with me. Tell me what you know.
Again, things happen for a reason. But what I found out there was we were walking through the woods, me, my sister, and some friends. We were out there camping. And my grandparents always took us camping somewhere. And so we went out there, and out in the woods, we found spray painted on the ground some markings. I don't know exactly what they were, but one did look like what I now know to be a pentacle, and it was red, and there was some weird words with it that I don't remember. And then there were also a bunch of candles. They were already burnt up, but they were just discarded. And I remember there being something that looked like blood off to the side and in the middle of this pentacle. And that's all I remember. I don't remember anything else. I just knew that it didn't seem right. And I was like, we need to go. And that was all that it was. So I didn't know if it was, demon worshiping, witches, what, I didn't know. I mean, I could only guess back then.
Do you happen to remember what area it was in?
It was about a half a mile back from one of the playgrounds. There was a campground back in there, and there was a playground near that campground, and it was about a half a mile in from there, in deep woods.
Are we talking about Gunpowder or Loch Raven? Because I know you mentioned both.
Loch Raven.
Okay. Interesting.
Gunpowder was different. There was no paint, but there was a lot of candles and a lot of bones. And I didn't know if it may have been hobos, because it wasn't that far from, I mean, you don't even hear the word hobo anymore. But back then there were a lot of people riding the trains, getting off at Chase and everywhere else and just walking back. They go down Ebenezer Road and head on back down towards there. And I knew that they would take these shortcuts through the woods to get to places. So I didn't know if the candles were related to something else, but it just never felt right.
Right.
And again, like they say, your gut always knows before your heart, your brain knows, your gut knows. So
sure.
It was, I got to get out of here. I think I was about 14 years old. It was me and Karen and Donna and Lynn. And, here we are, 14, 3 14-year-olds and a 13-year-old. Last thing we needed to be was caught by some weird people doing stuff that, I mean, we weren't doing anything wrong. We were just walking around, and it was broad daylight for us.
During the day, right?
Yeah, this was during the day for us. At Loch Raven, it was at night though, when we were walking around. And we did go back the next day during the day, but yeah, gunpowder was weird. But like I said, I didn't know if it might have just been homeless people or travelers or whatever going through, because we had a lot of that back then.
One of the stories I included in my book, I mean, I don't even really want to call it a story, but it was just a personal thing that happened to me. But as a kid, I discovered something like that in Dundalk. But the weird thing was, it was like right in the middle of a little suburban neighborhood. It was at the corner of a street and an alley, essentially. And it had been raining. So I don't know who did it, but there was a photograph, there was burnt candles, there was some religious objects that had been burnt. It was very deliberate, and it seemed where it happened was very deliberate. Like maybe it was focused on a person or something there. And it was just such a weird, bizarre discovery that even as a child, I knew like there's something weird about this, and there's something not right about it. And it just always stuck with me. So I wrote it in the book that you read. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that happening all the time that, again, unless you experience it, unless you happen to walk up on it, you didn't realize it's going on.
Yeah, well, you don't think anything of it at the time until somebody else says something that brings it to light. So when you said Dundalk, I went to Inverness Intermediate School. When was that? It was before my dad died, so it had to be like 1973, 74. And we lived in some apartments down by the water. You keep going down that road and you go to the right, there's apartments where you could see Bethlehem Steel and where they were building the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something right there on the shore where people were doing stuff that there was always cops. They called the cops. It seemed like every night there were cops out there for some reason. And maybe it's related to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about, there was a famous incident in the 80s rendition in England, UFO, where a UFO had come supposedly several nights at a military base where nuclear weapons were stored. And it's a big story. They call it the British Roswell. And everybody that's ever been at that base says that little town where this happened was like the center of witchcraft. It had such a reputation for that kind of stuff. And these U.S. airmen that were out there, security guards watching this, like they would regularly see people in robes out there night after night performing some sort of occult rituals. And then, all these UFOs start showing up. So it's one of the things that I have always been fascinated about. There are connections between these things. I don't know that I understand them, but there's something going on there.
I think it's just weird. Some of the things that we've talked about tonight that I haven't thought about since probably 1980. I know that seems like a long time ago, but yet in some cases it's not that long ago at all.
I've heard 3 stories from you tonight I've never heard.
Yeah, I mean, why?
I've never heard them before.
Yeah, it's never come up.
Right.
So how about I share another one? You up for another one?
I'm always up for another story.
All right. I'll tell you this one, and maybe you can offer some insight, because this one was new to me. So just this past year, after I moved to Middle River, I took a new job, and it is in Deep Creek. And like right after I took the job, I get this newspaper article, because this guy knew I was working on the book. He's a local historian. I come to me talk. He goes, "Yeah, I'm sure you already have this one already." And I was like, "No, I've never heard of it." In 1978, these 2 teenage girls were driving home. I think they were from Eastern Texas, but I could be wrong about that. And they're coming home, and they're driving down I think it's East Hamburg. I'm kind of confused because I know those streets have names turned up. But anyway, they see this UFO, and it's kind of hovering above Martindale Park. This is in end of March 28th maybe of 78. And so they drive home. They get out of their car. They can still see the thing. And this thing sort of tilts on its side. Now, this is something else that's interesting about the UFO phenomenon. These 2 girls are standing next to each other, but they kind of describe seeing 2 different things, which is interesting. But it tilts on its side. It goes down behind the trees into Martindale Park. And then the lights go out, and they assume it landed, and the girls get frightened, so they run in the girl's house. The girl's mother and sister come out. They see the thing rise up and take off. Now, one of the things I do, like I said, I'm kind of a very practical person. I don't go out places like EVP stuff and electronic meters and all, but I went through some old phone books, figured out exactly where these girls lived. I went to the house. I stood out in front of it. I was able to sort of determine, yeah, they could have seen something land in Martindale Park right there. And based on that point of view, I was sort of able to decipher where in the park it probably landed. And apparently, the very next day, there was official police report. They went there and they found this big, giant 25-foot burn marks in the grass. And the situation scared the young girl so much that she wanted to see it, but it took her several days to get up the courage to go see it. It was still there when she went there. And I can literally see the landing spot every day when I park my car and go to work. I love it because, like I said, I took this job, didn't even know this thing existed when I took the job. I found out about it afterwards. So every day I get to look at the UFO landing site when I go to work. Do you remember any of that happening?
I do remember some about that because I lived in East Rock at the time.
Okay.
So, and I went to Sandy Point Elementary School. And then my sisters also later on went to Deep Creek Middle School. So we were there quite a bit between 75. It was right after my dad died. I have my little picture with my Liberty Bell from Sandy Point in 76. But yeah, we lived in that area at the time. And I remember two girls. I don't remember which high school I think they went to like Kenwood, talking about something similar to that. Because I was always interested in all this weird stuff. And I remember hearing something about these girls that saw something that they couldn't explain. But, I didn't read a newspaper or anything like that. It was just basically word of mouth of kids talking to each other saying, can you believe this? They saw this. And I was like, wow, that's weird. So that's all I can remember about it. But I do remember it was odd.
Interesting. I'm just thumbing through the book right now because now you say Kenwood, you got me double thinking. Maybe the girls were from Kenwood. I don't know.
Well, I don't think Chesapeake. Chesapeake High School could have existed already too.
Mm-hmm. We should say if any of your listeners or watchers know any of this stuff, to get in contact with you. Maybe I can come back sometime and we can discuss this stuff further because there's a lot of people out there that know more than me. No more than me. Excuse me. And here we go. Martindale. It was March 28th. It was 1978.
Oh, Big Jim.
Big Jim, yeah. We get him.
Big Jim Jones. He probably knows Big Jim Jones.
I have the name of the girls in the book, but I don't think I have the name of the high school. I don't see it. So.
Well, that's easy enough to find out. You could always look it up on classmates.com.
I have it. I have the original article. I just don't have it in front of me right now.
So, like I said, I don't know if it was Kenwood or if it was Chesapeake, but I know at the time I was going to Stemmers. So, because in 78, I was still too young for high school and too old for elementary school.
Let me share another story with you. Now, this one's before your time, but it has some really, really interesting implications. So, in August of 1958, a girl is hanging out around the water down near the Martin plant. So I'm assuming it's like the Boys Quarters Hospital area. I don't know exactly where. And she and her friends see this glowing round object, self-illuminated. They can actually see the light from it reflecting into the water. It's silent, not making any noise, big, it's round, it's glowing. And suddenly it takes straight off. It's gone, up into the air. Now, it's definitely not a balloon. I've actually looked into like the historic weather reports from the area, and it was quite windy that day, and all the wind was blowing inland. So if there's a balloon just hanging out there in the water, it would have blown inland very, very quickly. The thing happened again the very next night. I don't know if she was there, but multiple people saw this thing 2 nights in a row. So the girl's mother sent in an official report to the Air Force, and they were very interested in knowing more about this. This happened, I think, on the 17th and 18th of '58. And so the Air Force had been calling and leaving messages trying to get the mother of this girl who filled out this report to call them back, and she wasn't calling them. 8 weeks later is when that famous Loch Raven event happened that I told you about, when the two guys saw a round glowing object and it left straight up in the air. And then it came back and people saw it the same night. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Air Force responded and took Loch Raven so seriously to now here is because they were already investigating a Middle River case, an identical object that came back 2 nights, seen by multiple people, only 8 weeks earlier. And they kept the file on that investigation open for 2 more months after the Loch Raven. So I think that's interesting. They're like 10 miles apart, maybe.
It makes me wonder, though, again, going back to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, if it's something that they were testing or even something that they were testing from Boeing, well, Glen Al Martin Airport. If people don't know, Martin's they built planes there, you know, and it was high security area. One of my mom's boyfriends at one time worked there. So, you know, and of course they always had somebody, one of the engineers would come and talk to us at school and things like that. But it just makes you wonder if it's related to either one of those, since the Air Force was so interested, as well as law enforcement and other people. It just makes you wonder.
I definitely think it could be related. But the thing I always come back to is, well, if they had something like that in 1958, we should have known about it by now. You know, it could be something they were working on, but I don't know.
It could have also been something that they got from, you know, World War II, from Germany, that the stuff that they brought over from, you know, because, you know, they brought stuff to Aberdeen, they brought stuff to, you know, up to Ohio, out to Area 51. You know, they brought all this stuff back, and then they were very hush hush about what they brought back, you know. And if they're, you know, it doesn't help how secretive they make everything as it is. But
Sure.
they still would have told people you didn't see what you saw, you know, things like that. And just from living in the area and knowing that, hey, if your boat accidentally went across this one place in the water, you were being escorted out with guns if you're not being arrested or shot. You know,
even today, there's areas you can't stop your boat, you can't touch land, you can't get out of your boat. Like, you take that kind of stuff for granted when you live around here. But another thing.
Yeah, I mean, just getting around Aberdeen Proving Grounds, you know, just around it, you know, you can't drive through it. You have to go around it, and you can't go over it, and you can't go under it. So this is one of those, you've got to go all the way around it, and it's not small.
In the whole story of the Harewood Park Bigfoot monster, basically Middle River, out of nowhere there was a Bigfoot. People started seeing it everywhere. It was a huge story at the time, and then it just disappeared and it went away. And I actually have it on good account from somebody that knew somebody that this guy admitted later, years later, that he was hoaxing the whole thing, but they didn't believe him. He told these people, hey, back in the 70s, I put in this costume, we went out on Pulaski Highway, middle of the road, and I've been out in the woods and all this stuff. And he just told these people, and they were like, yeah, whatever. And then when they got to know me and hear what I had to say, they're like, everything about that story matches up with what this guy said 20 years ago. Even to the fact that it was on TV and stuff like that. But what's interesting is the guy that was out there hoaxing, dressing up as Bigfoot, says that people were seeing things out there that were not him. There was something else going on in the woods out there. It was not all him.
Was it? Let's think about this. So I remember seeing the Gimlin film on the NBC nightly news in Paterson, New Jersey, one night, black and white, and I was teasing with my dad, and I said, you know, that's an alien, that came with a UFO. I didn't know what an alien was at the time. I said, but it came from outer space. And of course, I'm 7. I don't know anything. I'm just thinking it's weird. But the thing is it's still right around the same time that all these people started saying that they were seeing this thing. Could it possibly be mass hysteria? Or their minds actually making them see this? Were all these people sober? Let's be honest. Oh, it was the
I,
70s. People drank a lot.
I am very open-minded. I don't believe there's like simple explanations for all this stuff, like with that Bigfoot study. A lot of the stuff is hoax. A lot of it's misidentification. A lot of it's mental illness. A lot of it's, misidentification. Some of it that was really strange. The reason I bring up that whole Bigfoot thing is because but the reason I brought up the Bigfoot thing is because kind of after it happened, after it all died down, one of the guys who sort of came out and started talking about it in the months following that, he lived across the water over actually very, very close to where Frank had his hairy monster encounter. And he and his family and even some of the neighbors testified like, hey, we've seen this thing. It comes out of this area and swam up here and went in this direction, and this person saw it. And because I'm a nerd, I got out phone books, I got out old maps, and I looked, and I'm like, yep, that's what those people describes exactly how it could have went following that path. The guy that said all this later claimed that he had seen these things on and off for the whole next decade. And he and his father believed they were actually experiments, and they were coming from those Aberdeen Proving Ground islands that you brought up, the ones you're not allowed to go on. He claims that that's where it came from, and he says he's seen other weird mutations and stuff out there. So.
It wouldn't surprise me in the least, and you think about all the stuff now that's, I'd be surprised that the guy that's cleaning up Back River doesn't find shit that he's like, where in the hell did this come from? What in the hell is this?
He's talked about UFOs and stuff too. If you ever watch it, he knows a lot of stuff.
It's just interesting because my grandparents had a boat back off of Back River Neck Road, and of course Chesapeake High School was back off of Turkey Point, off Back River Neck Road, and I just remember going out there and seeing that this guy is cleaning it all up. It's amazing. And of course, in Hawthorne, the little park, you're going down Hawthorne Road, and it's in the back. You can see it from the elementary school. There was a pier there. One year, the tide was out. It was really low, and we all got on thick boots and went out there and cleaned it up. We did as much as we could, but it was a drop in the bucket. I don't know how this guy's cleaning up that much stuff every single day. It's amazing. Do you remember when the Chesapeake Bay froze back in 1978?
No.
Middle River was frozen solid. We walked across it from where I lived down by Kingsway Park. I lived on Kingsway Road, and then there was the other road. I forgot what it was called, but we walked across from there to the other side, which, is pretty much over by Riverwood. And so you could walk straight across there. There were cars out there driving around.
Oh, the
People
ice?
had fires. Yeah. Big, huge trucks and stuff just driving around out there. If you pull up old newspapers, it's like 78 and 79. It was a bad winter.
Well, So Frank Bennett's experience, I think, because he's talking about in his book how the gunpowder was frozen. I think it happened around 80. And some of the research I did was actually like trying to figure out, well, maybe he had the years wrong and stuff. And I actually did some research. In 78 was an extremely cold winter around here. I remember that. Although Frank
it was.
I believe his dates are correct. It was just other alternative theories I was looking at.
Frank is very good with years. Don't know how, but he is. But I told him, I said, I hate to say this, but if you had been just a little bit younger or I had been a little bit older and the timing had been different, we may have met back then. but I was too young, and he was hanging out with older women, and I was just I was still just a young teenager, and he was, like I said, he's hanging out in bars and crap. Not me, at least not without my mom.
You mentioned Bill Bean earlier. It's funny because I read Bill Bean's early books, and I read Frank's books, and for the longest time, like I would have loved to have met the guys, like just to know them or whatever. And I can't tell you how many times I'd walk into a place and I'd see a sign Bill Bean was there the night before giving a public talk, or Frank Bennett had been somewhere. And for the longest time, to this day I've never met either one of them in person. But because I featured both their stories in my book, and they were both kind of a local inspiration to me when I was done the book, I sent each one of those guys a copy, and since then I've been in contact with them, which is really cool. But yeah, it's funny you meet people and sort of like cross paths with people or come close to them, and later on, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, we met Frank in Kansas City.
Really?
So yeah,
Even though
he was sitting behind.
area.
Well, we lived in Kansas City for 40 years in the area, and he was sitting behind me. He had a table at this Paracon that we were at, and we were there as liaisons from the Sally House in Atchison, Kansas. So, and I don't know if you ever heard about it, but it used to be the most haunted house in the state of Kansas, and it was on TV and all this, and everybody at that time, everybody wanted to know us because we were on TV. Big deal, But at that time, he said something behind me, and I looked at Ron and said, he's from Baltimore.
Yeah.
and I walked over and I sat down and I said, so where in Baltimore are you from? And found out that pretty much it was about 4 or 5 miles from where I was at when I was growing up, but 4 or 5 years different.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen Frank a lot of times. He even came to Ron's surprise birthday party, came all the way from Ohio at the time. And of course, now he's here in Florida as well. We're still planning to go over and see him at some point in St. Augustine. So we plan on doing that. He knows it. It's just he's been busy. So have we.
So we've mentioned him several times. Why don't I share Frank's story? It's in the book, and I'm sure people that don't know him would love to hear it. So, and hopefully, Mr. Bennett, I hope I do it justice here. But
he'll listen to this in replay, just so you'll know. He will listen in replay.
Thank you. So Frank grew up. He's actually from Middle River, where I live, but he grew up a little further west in Harford County, and so So people in his neighborhood were experiencing, I guess, what you might call Bigfoot type stuff. There's a lot of other things going on. I won't get into it. I'll save that for him. But he's out one day, he's hiking along the Gunpowder, and he follows this river all the way towards the very end, where it empties into the Gunpowder River. It's basically across the street from my house. And like what often happens in these kind of situations, he gets the feeling that something is off. Like there's this sort of psychic precursor. He didn't just turn around and see something weird. He knew it was there before he even saw it. And then he also experienced this silence. And if you've ever been everywhere, there's sounds everywhere. There's noise, especially man-made noise everywhere you go. But so many people that have UFO sightings and strange encounters, they touch this sudden silence, and there's nothing. He doesn't hear the birds or anything. And he turns around and sees this thing looking at him. And it's what most people would call a Bigfoot. But it's wearing a shirt and pants. And he's just kind of staring at this thing. And this thing jumps up like 10, 15 feet in the air. And it's screaming and yelling and making all this noise and everything. It scares the bejesus out of him. Eventually, it kind of sort of goes away and things return to normal. And he's calm enough and brave enough to turn his back and sort of head back home. But it's such a fascinating encounter. It has so many interesting elements to it, from the silence, that sort of psychic premonition, the fact that it was wearing clothes. It's such a cool story. That's one of the reasons I love it so much.
There should have been a lot more noise with everything being frozen.
Yeah, it was really cold. He said.
Yeah, it was in February, I believe.
I went to a public talk recently, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to be a jerk here because I misquote stuff all the time, and nobody can know all this stuff. But the person speaking brought Frank's Encounter, and they were describing it, and they had pictures to go on and everything. But because it's the Aberdeen Wildman, they thought that it happened in Aberdeen, so they portrayed it as happening in like this busy street with cars around and buildings and stuff. And it cracked me up because that would make it even cooler. Like to see a Bigfoot wearing clothes downtown in Aberdeen would be even crazier. But it was still fun. I still enjoyed it.
Yeah. So apparently they read the title of the book and just made an assumption.
Hey man, I've done that before. When you're asked to do these public talks, sometimes you have to fill a certain amount of time. You have to talk about some things that you don't really necessarily know a lot about. People ask about things. So it happens.
Sometimes though, it is okay to say, I don't know. I'll find out and get back to you. Could you give me your information and I'll get back to you. Just keep that in mind.
So in one of my recent talks, I was asked to talk about some astronomy, and I'm like, and it was at a planetarium. I said, I'm not even going to pretend. There's no way. I'll talk about local history or something, serious if you want to talk about something serious, but I'm not going to pretend that I understand anything about astronomy.
I'll have to tell you, I know astronomy from when Pluto was a planet. Okay.
Me too.
That's it. So I couldn't talk to you about anything other than, ooh, that's pretty. So
I meant to tell you this earlier, but we didn't really get a chance to talk beforehand. You let me know if I'm rambling on too much or saying too much. I'm very flexible. I'm thick-skinned. If I'm talking too much, you just let me know.
No, you're great. You're doing a great job. In fact, I think I'm going to have to ask you to come back because we haven't gotten to any of the questions that I had written down for you. And as my husband can see, I had a whole bunch of them ready.
I can shut up if you want to ask me some questions, please. Whatever works for you. I'd love to come back, but either way, you let me know.
I think I'd like to do another one. And I'm going to try to do it after the first of the year, only because I know that it's getting hard for people with Christmas is early this year because Thanksgiving was late.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would like to thank you so much for coming on and got engrossed with the story. That's great. Thank you, Crystal. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening and joining in tonight. And Lisa, I did see that you're here. And Dolores, thank you so much for coming. I assume that you know the author.
Yeah.
That's my mom. My mom.
And Susan and Mike, Tom, click the bell on YouTube. You know how to do that. Hopefully you'll start getting your notifications. Check your email address. Make sure that it's right. And thank you guys all for listening tonight. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And those of you that are in the middle of the snow, please be careful because I know at least, well, Crystal's in Denver. They're not getting much snow. They just got dusting. But everybody else, be careful out there and know that we give a crap. We're worried about you guys. But I would like to thank you so much, Joshua, for coming on. And I will contact you and make sure that we get you a date in January to talk again. So thank you guys. Have a great night. And please make sure that you guys are checking us out on all the places where you've caught us tonight, YouTube and Temple of Phoenix Rising Entertainment, Things Network, which Ron and I are a member of Things of Florida, the Bill of Rights Network, as well as the Denise Pridemore LinkedIn and the Paranormal Pride YouTube and Facebook pages. And you can also catch us in replay on Dark Realm TV. Check it out. It's an app that you can get. It's $4.99 a month, $49 a year, and you get great things like original video casts like this, as well as original movies and other things. So check those out. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know, and I will make sure that I ask them the next time I have on Joshua. And so you guys all have a great night and see you soon.
All right.
Good night.